And you are live.
Great, thank you. Good morning. This is a meeting of the, I want to say Justice Oversight Committee. That is not right. The Joint Fiscal Committee on June 22nd. Thank you all for joining us. The first order of business is adopting the minutes of April 14th. Would somebody care to make a
So
motion?
moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, we don't meet often enough. So we do vote, and we do this by voice or?
Voice.
Voice, okay. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those are adopted. The next order of business is hearing the grant request for $50 million dealing with the Federal Homeowners Assistance Program, which is part of the ARPA grant. We have a number of people joining us to understand this proposal. Thank you all very much for joining us. There are so many of you. I am not going to try to introduce or call you out individually. I am assuming, Commissioner Hanford, that you are probably the lead on this, perhaps with Ms. Collins. And so let me turn this over to you. Let's hear your presentation, and then I'm sure we will have questions about it. So thank you. With that, Commissioner Hanford.
Well, good morning, committee members. Hopefully your summer is off to a good start. Thanks for having us here this morning. I'm going to be pretty brief and just hit outlines on the memo. Hopefully you all got a chance to see that we provided. This is funding provided from the ARPA funds. It's $50 million is Vermont's allocation to help income eligible homeowners pay their mortgage, their utilities, property taxes, those sort of household expenses, in addition to some ability to receive some counseling and some necessary minor home repairs to keep people stably housed within this program. The program is pretty prescriptive. The way the law was passed, it describes, what we need to do and what makes folks eligible. And it lays out a process for us to develop a plan to submit to HUD, not HUD, excuse me, that's what I usually work with, Treasury, that describes how we're going to run the program here in Vermont. And they originally set a date of June 30th for that plan. But it's not that the plan needs to be fully complete. It's also a date by which we can ask for more time before submitting the final plan, because Treasury has not released their template plan and all the guidance necessary to wrap this up and have a program ready for them to fully approve. They have already released 10%, so $5 million to Vermont to get started. The idea there is there's work to be done even as this plan is developed, consultants to be hired, vendors to be interviewed, a public process to be undertaken, which Vermont Housing Finance Agency has already begun. And, as the memo lays out, Department of Housing and Community Development would grant almost this entire funding to VHFA to run the program. There is one limited service position that DHCD would like approved for about a 2-year period to help us monitor and manage this grant. Unlike some of the other large funding that's passed through, AOA is not sort of the pass-through managing entity. It's the department, and we'll have auditing and monitoring responsibilities that we want to make sure with this larger grant and the importance of it, that we have someone that's dedicated to making sure, all the reports are submitted and everything's done as required. What else is in the memo here? This also will have a coordination with the Public Service Department, because there is utility assistance available And there will be a collaboration with VHFA and Public Service Department to make those funds available. And it has a maximum 15% general administration cost, which is available for all entities to use up to that maximum 15% to carry out the program. So, what we're hopeful today is that you will be able to approve the full allocation here, so this can get started. And I'm happy to answer questions. I think, Maura Collins, Executive Director of VHFA, is here. She will be better to answer the detailed questions about program design and rollout. We also have George Demas, the General Counsel from VHFA here, who's been involved in this, and Maxwell Krieger, the DHCD General Counsel, who has also been involved with this development of this program. In addition, we have Public Service Department members here for that component. So unless you want more detail from me, I think it's best maybe to open questions and direct them to the appropriate staff on the call, or maybe have Maura give a little bit more detail.
Yeah, let's hear from Ms. Collins, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Ms. Collins.
Thank you. I'm used to committee testimony. I'm Maura Collins with VHFA. I just wanted to remind you all, because you have so much to deal with during session and then you come to this abrupt end, I wanted to remind you of what you already know about the mortgage assistance that you've provided to residents already, that this HAF, Homeowner Assistance Fund from the feds, is really just the latest of mortgage assistance that has been available in 2020 and 2021 already through VHFA. You all took CARES Act dollars, CRF funds. You had about $5 million go through VHFA. So in July of last year through November, we accepted applications to assist people with mortgage arrearages. Even though we cut off applications in November, it takes a while to deal with loan servicers. They are not a speedy bunch. So we were able to include December mortgage payments in our payments. And so we were able to cover, have a program open for 6 months of last year to help folks with past due property taxes, mortgage arrearage, and the like. Then in your wisdom, you put another $5 million of remaining CRF funds to VHFA, and we reopened a program in May, which remains open now. At the time, I remember there being questions saying, why would we take another $5 million of CRF funds and create a mortgage assistance program when we know this $50 million HAF program is coming? And I have to say, in hindsight, that was 100% the right decision, because what you've done is you have bought time where Vermonters, income eligible Vermonters who are in arrears, are able to be assisted through the more flexible CRF funds. And it buys us time to really design this HAF program well, so that by the time the doors are going to open to the public, which we hope will be in August or September, that we will not have to change eligibility or have glitchy computer systems or have those kind of growing pains. But instead, our hope is that we will be able to figure all that out before that program opens. And yet there's still assistance being provided to the people who need it now. So if you add together what was done last year and the applications that we received this year, we've helped just under 1,200 Vermonters, and we've had deployed or have applications for about 9 million of the just about $10 million you had available. The monthly income of folks is $3,000 a month. So these are very low income individuals. And 60% of them owe more than 6 months of past due mortgages. So we're really helping folks by giving them about $6,500 at a pop. Those who don't escrow their taxes, we're paying $2,000 is the median amount for property taxes. So the money is going out the door. We likely will be closing that program soon, because as I've said, we've almost spent the 10 million that you've appropriated. But we always knew, it's always been our intention to close that program and have a little bit of a break before we open the new HAF program. And that is to make it easier on consumers so that we can end one and then remarket a new one, because there are new rules under this new program that will be different than how things worked under the CRF funded program. And even having just a month in between kind of cleanses the palate and gets folks understanding that this is a new program. But the last thing I want to say is just to reiterate exactly what Commissioner Hanford said, which is the HAF program is more restrictive. We will not be able to have the same level of flexibility with this program that we have had over the past year. And so it is very important that the money be released and that we be allowed to go to the full extent that Treasury allows, because already those are lower income limits and more narrow targeting of funding in many ways. And so we would strongly recommend that the state not further limit the eligibility of households for this money, but instead allow us to serve all the people that Treasury allows, because $50 million is a lot of money. And we would like to be able to serve as many people as possible. The income limits, though, do cap us mostly around the median income of the state. Sometimes we can go a little higher than that for certain households, but most of the money has to be targeted to 100% of median income or below. And that's lower than who we've been serving through the previous program over the past year. Those are my comments, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. We are getting a number of them. I'm going to try to do it in order. Representative Fagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So either Ms. Collins or Mr. Hanford, we're hearing that it's prescriptive, and you've teased us a little bit with some information as far as this is what the requirements are. Can you kind of just lay them out for us, though? What are the requirements? That's my first question. My second question, funding for this program, does it go to the homeowners, or does it go direct to the mortgage servicers and or the municipalities for utilities?
Good questions. So it's a good question, the first one, because I'm going to give you two different answers. And so there is more restrictive limiting of who is eligible, but there's a broader, longer list of what is eligible to be paid for. So on the who is eligible, right now our income limits roughly, not exactly, match 120% of area median income, but we've used some broad statewide number. We have a Chittenden County number, and then we have a rest of the state number. And that's why I'm saying it's not exactly 120% median. The new program tells us we have to use county medians. It has to be 100% of median income, or the greater of the county median, or a national number. And then, like I said, for certain, they're called socially disadvantaged communities, we can go up to 150% of median income. And socially disadvantaged communities is a Small Business Administration term that categorically presumes that minorities, Black, Indigenous people of color will qualify, and then they allow the state to otherwise identify what a socially disadvantaged community is, and we're working with ACCD on that. So also, the CARES Act required a COVID connection, like a household who had unemployment or things like that, and they had to be somehow impacted economically by the pandemic. This time, it's a bit of a looser connection where it says that they had to economically be impacted by COVID in general, which could mean that the cost of goods are higher for things, or it's not so much of a direct connection. George, before I move on to the increased eligible expenses, was there anything else about the populations that I'm missing about the eligibility? You're muted if You're about to answer.
Sorry, the only other specific thing is that the income eligibility is based on household size. We've been using just sort of a general average. And so now we're required to go specifically by household size. So, it's individual, everybody has their own different income spread, but otherwise I think you got everything.
Yeah, and we'll have to get paperwork on their incomes, whereas with CRF funds, we could do a self-attestation. And we all know that it's those confirming paperworks that slow down systems. So there will be a higher burden in that way, and that's going to naturally reduce demand. But the list of eligible uses is broader than what you all allowed us to do with CRF funds. You allowed us to do mortgage arrearages on first mortgages, primary mortgages, and property taxes for homeowners with mortgages, because we were trying to prevent foreclosure. This new program is broader. It can cover mortgage arrearages. It also can cover property taxes just for owners. You don't have to have a mortgage. It will cover homeowner insurance as well as property insurance, HOA fees, utilities will be covered in this, which is different, including broadband, which is a little different than even the utility assistance y'all have created. There's some homeownership counseling eligible, up to 5% of the money can be used on homeownership counseling and education. Some home repairs if it prevents the displacement of households, and likely some other things I've missed, but it's a much broader use of funds.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And what about the funding going directly to the servicers or whatever?
I forgot about that. The money will go directly to the servicers, which is what we've done for the previous program. In the case of property taxes, it goes directly to the municipality. No money goes to the homeowner, either in the previous program or this upcoming one.
It just makes it easier and quicker. So thank you.
And there's in fact a national system, which is why I just really hope that Vermont can come out as standard as possible with going with US Treasury, because there's actually a national effort. Unlike the previous program where Vermont was, again, a visionary leader in creating mortgage assistance using CRF funds, but we created it based on what Vermont needed. This is national. And so there's more than 50 national servicers, Quicken Bank, Citizens, US Bank, all the big names who've come together, have a common data platform. They're with all the state housing agencies. It's going to be a systematized system. That's not how you say that. Where you go, where everything is going to be standardized. That's what I'm trying to say. In communicating with these servicers so they know how to apply these payments. And that is going to be critical to having this go fast and smooth for the consumers who are going to be impacted.
Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, just looking at the agenda, we have about 20 more minutes on this item. Clearly, we will take as much time as we need, but not all day. So next up is Senator Balin.
Morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. First question is about the geographic distribution of the funds that went out through the CRF program. And you don't need to go over that now, but if you have a document that shows that, I would just love to see geographic distribution of those dollars. Is that possible more?
We have an online website that gets updated weekly with that information and compares it to the number of homeowners in every county. So you can see the under and overserved communities. I think you'll be very pleased with your county. And also the stats I was referencing are also on there about who's been served. So I'll make sure that link gets to you all.
Thank you. And then the second one, when you reference the homeowner counseling services available, does that include technical assistance and outreach for people actually getting the paperwork done? As you said, that's now an additional burden. Wondering how your shop's navigating that.
That wouldn't be covered under the 5% limit, but would be covered within the 15% admin that we are budgeting for. As with the last program, we have an existing relationship with the 5 state homeownership centers, AALV, the Vermont Center for Independent Living, 2 NAACP chapters. And we're happy to add more of organizations that can do that kind of hand-holding, sitting with people, helping them fill out paper applications and do what's needed to make sure that we're reaching especially underserved populations in rural areas or those who traditionally are marginalized or underserved.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Kitchell.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a little late. It seems like when I start a meeting, somebody comes to the door. One of the things that intrigued me, but I'm wondering how you plan to administer it, and it's around the home repairs that are necessary. And that calls for judgment. Is it necessary for the habitability? But it could be anything from a leaking roof to a fuel, a heating system. Is that something that you're going to administer directly, or are you looking at? And the reason that I'm thinking about it is in the budget we had, and Senator Westman can speak to this, funding for individuals at our community action agencies to work with families, because money's going down in so many different ways, whether it's weatherization, whether it's assistance for utilities or mortgages now and so forth. So I was just wondering around that particular item, which is new, and it kind of piqued my interest in terms of what the possibility might be there for how expansive we can look at that home repair covered service.
Yeah, right now, one obvious program that I can imagine would qualify would be Vermont Center for Independent Living's home access program, where they provide accessibility modifications. So that's one partner we've already reached out to and heard from about their waiting list and how much would they need and things like that. We also have talked a little with the home ownership centers who have existing revolving loan funds to do improvements on homes. But the community action agencies is another great partner who we haven't talked to yet, but plan to. As for the determining of the but-for question of would it lead to displacement, that is something that we still need to develop. And I don't exactly know how we're going to answer that question today, but I know the agencies who have long-standing histories of working with this population will be able to help us craft that. And so our intention is absolutely to have the money flow through those regional nonprofits, like I mentioned. Maybe there's others if people have ideas, but yeah.
Thank you.
Interesting. Senator Westman.
So just a comment to follow up on what Senator Kitchell just raised. The community action agencies are in the process now of hiring 5 new counselors that sit down with specifically this population and a statewide coordinator to be able to move ahead in helping these families understand whether 2 of those agencies already have those counselors. So I would encourage you to reach out to the community action agencies then. My question for you, because this is in some ways eligibility is more complex, and having heard from a number of people about rental assistance, the rental assistance program that ended in December, money is just going out this month. So and they had income requirements for that. So money is going out just this month back to the 1st of January. And if I'm eligible for property taxes and all of I have a number of communities that pay quarterlies and have taxes due in July. How long is it going to take for you to get this money out the door? And functionally, what do you see as a timeline? Are we looking at 2 months? Are we looking at 3 months? How long will it take you to get this money out the door?
So by June 30th, we have to tell the Treasury when they will receive our plan for these funds. I would anticipate that plan, we would pick a date in July that I'm not prepared to tell you yet because I don't know what it is, but I think it'll be in July. And then we have to get Treasury approval, which I would hope would happen in August. So I'm internally planning for a September launch as of June 22nd. We still have not picked a.
So, yeah, so a September launch means that you're going to take applications in
Correct.
September. And how long after that would you get money out the door?
It depends on how standardized our system is compared to other states. So to the extent that Vermont's program looks like most other states out there, I think that could start flowing quite quickly because these loan servicers are prepared and set up to have bulk payments be received in a certain standard. But we have not yet chosen, we did an RFP for a software vendor who will be assisting us with that. We got 10 responses. We're narrowing that down now, doing references, demos, and all that. So I would need to I need to pick a vendor before I can ask the vendor from their point of view how long this would take. This will sound hollow and I am uncomfortable saying it, but I feel a responsibility to say this, that as a mission-driven nonprofit, I want to help people today. And if Maura was in charge of the world, I would be cutting checks by now. But I am not. And I do want to remind everyone that foreclosures and property tax sales are appropriately very long, drawn-out processes. And unlike evictions, which can happen somewhat quicker, the foreclosure process to make its way through the courts takes a considerable amount of time. And even tax sales, even once a tax sale happens, there is still, George can correct me, I think 12 months for a homeowner to then pay the taxes past due. So if our payments came, this would create unneeded stress and burden on homeowners. This is not my goal to drag my feet and have this take a long time, but I also am somewhat reassured that the consumer protections you all have put in place on the foreclosure and tax sale side for the state will protect people from being displaced, even if there was a 2-month lag in setting up a program like this.
So basically what I hear from that September and 2 months after that, I'm looking at probably November before any money will go out. And so
no, but that's
but that's what I'm hearing, and I know you don't know. So my question in this, there are penalties for being late. There are, the day you are late on property taxes in my town, the minute you're late is 8%. Are all the penalties eligible for money in the process? Because all of this is stressful for those homeowners.
Yes, all of those late fees would be eligible, and same with the fees associated with delinquent mortgage payments as well. And if an HOA had a penalty fee for having your monthly condo association fees be late, that's all eligible under this program.
I just say, I wish the banks were a little more generous because through all this process with their late fees when they know people are working.
Thank you. Representative Briglin?
Good morning, Maura. Thanks for joining us. Just a general question about what the scale of the mortgage arrearage situation is in Vermont right now, particularly for this population. I'm thinking of this relative to the CRF funding and the $10 million that was put forward there. 9 million of that, I think you said, has been allocated at this point. How much more had been requested there? What is the oversubscribed rate, if you will, for that program? How much will this $50 million address the 100% area median income mortgage holders who are currently behind on their mortgage? I just want to get a sense of the scale of the problem and to the extent that this $50 million will address it.
to answer the easiest part first, the 9 million is not oversubscribed. Those are all the applications we've received. And so that does, we still are accepting applications because we still have money and we would take in more. So I hope you help us promote that program. As for the universe, we are currently collecting data from every source we can find. We've gotten some data directly from the Treasury, US Treasury, where they've told us about government insured mortgages and what the delinquencies are there. We are buying data. We are looking under every rock we can for information about this size and scope of this problem. And I don't have numbers to give you today. By the time we produce our half plan to Treasury, there will be numbers in that. We're also talking with Vermont League of Cities and Towns and municipalities about the size and scope of the property tax delinquencies. George, I can't think of any numbers right now that really answer that question fully, but I know that we need to, as a part of the Treasury plan, have some kind of idea of what the size and scope of the need is. But we're still collecting it. So if I gave you a number now,
yep,
3 days from now, it'll be increased when I get new data from a new source.
And I don't know if it's at all indicative in terms of the federally insured mortgages. I've checked in with a number of banks in my area, and actually their arrearage numbers on mortgages are low, quite low, actually. And I don't know if that falls in line with some of the federally insured programs, or if those are very different.
The federally insured programs predominantly have higher delinquency rates than non-federally insured because they are targeted to lower income homeowners. But I thought that last year when you appropriated $5 million for the first mortgage assistance program, some of you may remember I was not happy about it because I thought we needed a lot more. And then it turned out to be the right amount. And then this year we were surprised by the demand. When we reopened the doors in May, we had twice as many applications on day one as our highest day of the previous year. So I've learned to stop listening to my gut and instead just look at the data because I keep misreading the demand and need out there. But I do think that it is possible that arrearages are not as bad as I fear. $50 million is the small state minimum. So you all are used to this idea that maybe some would argue Vermont has been overserved in the amount of funding for this program. And that's why we plan to use fully the 5% available for education and counseling, and also look at this home repair opportunity as ways to make sure that we can deploy all the funds over the next couple of years.
And what I was also getting around to was some of the flexibility in the Treasury guidance in terms of how this can be used for utility issues. And I haven't gotten an update on what those numbers are since May, but they're significant. And not on, my sense is not only are those issues for middle and low income folks, but as the utility arrearages increase, they affect all ratepayers in Vermont. So to the extent that you're designing these programs, I'm really interested to stay in touch on, to the extent that there's money that there isn't a need for in terms of mortgage arrearages, to the extent that you are directing these monies to address some of the utility arrearages. And there's certainly been a lot of talk about affordability in terms of broadband access for folks and where money might come from for that. And knowing that this money can be used in the next couple of years, I'll be interested to see how, some of the program design might address some of those issues. And Maura, I'm not even sure if that's in your area with, at VHFA and where some of the program design might occur. So maybe that's a question for Josh, but I'll be interested to watch that.
We've been talking just about weekly with the Department of Public Service. I see Louise and Carol are on and working hand in glove so that really they can design that. And then we can find the best way for consumers to have easy access to applying for that funding. But I don't know, Carol or Louise, if you want to jump in.
Certainly. So I'm Carol Flint with the Department of Public Service, and We have been working, as Maura references, with both ACCD and VHFA to talk about how we could roll out utility assistance or be helpful to them with rolling out utility assistance for Vermonters who are homeowners. As you know, we have some money, CRF monies that we're about to launch, a $15 million rearage assistance program that should help with the most pressing needs for folks who are concerned about potentially, I mean, we don't know yet if the disconnection moratorium will be lifted at the end of the month, but potentially it could be. And our hope is that within the next few weeks, we will be able to get money flowing from that pot of monies, which need to be spent before the end of September. And then VHFA's plan to unroll the assistance program for homeowners in the fall neatly coincides with when that program will end. And so at that point, our hope is that we will be still running concurrently the emergency rental assistance program, utility help, the VHFA's half homeowner assistance fund with utility help. And so that will take us into the winter months, and we will continue for a while. I'm not sure exactly what period of time, at least another year on the rental assistance side, and then a couple of years, I heard Maura say earlier, on the homeowner assistance side, offering utility assistance. Each of these programs have slightly different application details around eligibility, and all of that still has to be worked out. But the $15 million from COVID relief funds that have to be spent this year is the most generous in terms of flexibility and opportunity for people who are in need at the moment. So the Department of Public Service will be putting some information on its website just under the pretty sunflower banner right in the middle. So that's the best place to direct constituents for information. And I would look for that information to be up by the end of next week. I wouldn't expect to see the application available until probably right around the first week of July. But even that's moving pretty rapidly. That's my goal. I'm not sure we can get there, but that's my goal. So I think that was sort of a broad overview. I'm not sure if I addressed the specific question. So please come back at me with questions. I'm happy to try to parse it out.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I had a question. I'm wondering if you can see, you or any of the folks participating can say a little bit more about the counseling services that are going to be offered and who will be offering them. That just strikes me as the way to get knowledge about these programs out there.
Yes, and we put out a post maybe 10 days ago asking for input and feedback on that. And we've already heard from Vermont Legal Aid as well as some of the homeownership centers in the state. We're asking organizations across the state now who would be best served to provide this kind of assistance, and are hoping that those who do this work will let us know how that should be scaled, shaped, and sized. And then we'll look at those responses that we get and allocate money to those providers accordingly, and create the kind of system of record keeping and the like. But that is not something VHFA would do directly. We would look to organizations that have that experience to provide that counseling. I have heard, though, that there is some money for counseling available again this year already. So that's another thing that if we have a slower deployment of this plan, there's already some CDBG money, Commissioner, I think, going to this and other things, so that really this money would probably, if we were charting it out, balloon more in another year or two when the other funds run out. This money would allow us to keep a level set amount of assistance provided for education and counseling. That's my vision of it.
Thank you. And will the details or the plan that you are submitting to Treasury for their approval will lay out the elements that we've been talking about here today. So you've done public hearings, you have an obligation to submit a plan by a date certain, and that is that's the plan of action then for the money going forward. So if people are interested in the process, they should be commenting on the plan and participating in that process to make sure that Vermonters' needs are met.
Yes, and I'll put in a plug that we have our third public hearing at noon today. But when we do have a drafted half plan, once Treasury tells us what it's supposed to look like, we will put that out. We will have more public hearings on that. It will not likely go into the level of detail that we've been speaking about today. It will more be a high level budget, that says whatever the math is of $5 million, 5% will go to homeownership counseling and this and that. It's not going to detail out everything, but in the link that I plan to send you all in response to Senator Ballant's question about geographic distribution, VHFA really prides itself on its transparency. We have whole web pages set up to show, as I said, like the weekly demand for these programs. And so we're known for over communicating, if you can't tell by how much I talk. And so we do plan on putting all the details out there for people to comment on, because what we have learned from others' experience in other states and even within Vermont with these emergency programs is the more you can tell people before a program launches how it's going to look and feel and sound and smell like, the easier the rollout will be. And so I would like it to be perfectly clear who's going to get money for doing what, when, how that's going to work, and then sit back for a few weeks, have conversations about it, and then go and launch. So that is one of the reasons why I may be taking a somewhat conservative timeline approach with some of these, because I think that the more we can work out these details before consumers have to be tugged between these decisions, the better.
Thank you. So committee, this is an action item. The question before us is whether or not we will accept this grant. Someone care to make a motion? Senator Kitchell.
I move approval of the acceptance of this grant. I don't have the number in front of me, but Teresa will have it in the memo. So I move approval of the grant.
30.
I'll second it.
And thank you. And further discussion, Representative Ansel? You're
muted. I was also going to move approval, but I won't do that because Senator Kitchell has done it for me. But I do want to also say that I agree completely with approving it, but I want to be sure that the committee sees the plan when it's prepared. So if I could make that request.
Thank you very much. And in terms of where members of the public or ourselves, if we want to look at the details, are we going to the VHFA website or to ACCD?
VHFA would,
okay.
We're going to keep it simple for everyone to go there for the information.
Okay, thank you.
So I appreciate that we can go out and look for it, but I'm asking if we can actually receive a copy of it, a link to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ansel. I understood that, and I hope that we will get that. I just want to make clear how folks can follow this process and where they should be going for information. Senator Kitchell.
Yeah, I made the motion. I guess so. It's all right. We have a little bit more discussion. I just wanted to confirm. I heard that there were with the plan there was an intent to have public hearings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it seems like this is going to be a fairly broad and visible process in addition to this written document that we would be receiving as well. So thank you. I wanted to make sure I understood that or remembered it.
Thank you. And we can also add this to our agenda in July for just an update on how it's going and what the final plan that has been submitted also. Okay. So I am not going to be able to, I'm not going to try to thank everybody who's joined us for this presentation, but other than to say generally, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and just also your work on what is a tremendously important program for Vermonters. So thank you very much. Moving on the agenda.
Do you want to vote on the motion?
Oh, that! Roll call on this one. Thank you, Peter. Will you call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will. Representative Ansel.
Yes.
Oh, boy, this is an old one. I am not going to say Senator Ash. Let's see. Hey, there's one that works. Okay, Representative Ansel is a yes. Representative Briglin.
Yes.
Representative Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Sears. Senator Balint.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator Sears. Absent. And Representative Hooper.
Yes.
We are 901 approved.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Next on the agenda is an overview of where we are with the CRF monies. Commissioner Gresham is with us, and I believe also Ms. Elmquist is here to do a presentation. We are already running over time. We allocated 10 minutes, but I'll turn this over to you, Commissioner Gresham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Message received. So on your, as part of the documents for the Joint Fiscal Committee, we submitted a report. It's on the JFC website, originally submitted on May 28th and subsequently updated on June 16th. It's entitled Coronavirus Relief Fund Report per Section 2C of Act 9. That has in painstaking detail what we have done and accomplished with the Coronavirus Relief Fund, where the assets have been deployed. The author of that report, Candace Elmquist, she is our senior analyst in finance and management, and she has been tracking every penny, nickel, and quarter of this fund since the first check hit the bank last April. I thought it would be most efficient if she came to kind of give you an overview of the report with the chair's permission.
Yes, please. Ms. Elmquist.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, representatives and senators. So I'm going to start with Exhibit E here and move fairly quickly, but just wanted to tell you where I was in case you were following along in the report. So this report in Exhibit E gives you movement in the fund since the BAA, which was in April, but I'm going to focus on movement in June since there was a lot of movement in June. So we started June with just under 2 million available in unappropriated funds. We had a total of 32.85 million available that was brought back to the bottom line via reversions and negative ERRs. These were offered primarily by public safety and AHS appropriations, and they were due to the 100% FEMA match policy and also just closing out grant programs and administrative and operating costs. Departments were not forced to offer up funds. The 32.85 million was simply a result of asking departments what was available. So of the 32.85 plus the 2 million that was originally on the bottom line at the start of June, plus an expected fund interest of 280,000, that's 35 million. And we allocated that 35 million to 4 different CRF eligible expenses, all of which have been previously approved by this committee or by the legislature. Those 4 reallocations are 260,000 to AOE. They had previously incorrect estimates for child nutrition and LEA grant programs. So this was just to close out those 2 grant programs. 2.4 million to public safety for PPE that has already been received and paid for, but is no longer FEMA 100% match eligible because Vermont is donating that PPE to our sister state, North Macedonia. And then 2 large appropriations for CRF eligible payroll. The first being 14.75 million to corrections and 17.6 million to public safety. So, and I can stop whenever, Chair, but I have more. So all of these previously mentioned reversions and reallocations have already been accomplished. The payroll reallocations that I just mentioned for corrections and public safety will result in 26.75 million GF available from both corrections and public safety, and an additional 5.6 million TF available. These available general fund and transportation fund dollars will not be reverted in FY21, and therefore will not fall into the FY21 bottom line for the revenue waterfall construct in Act 74. The reversions will occur in the FY22 BAA, and they may be proposed to be put to, towards Medicaid pressures. The AHS GC transfer memo outlined significant Medicaid pressures due to the lack of redeterminations we had to agree to for the enhanced FMAP bump. And the Medicaid Consensus Forecast Group is convening in July to forecast pressures for FY22 and FY23. So that would be the basis of knowing what we might need for the BAA. So after everything I've mentioned, we only have 2,000 CRF unappropriated. And that's including, that is including the estimate for the fund interest. So as the commissioner said, we really are counting pennies here. I'm going to move to Exhibit F briefly to talk about the cash balance. Briefly. So the final row of Exhibit F in column AC reports that to the date of this report, at least, we've spent 1.15 million. And if you subtract that from the original 1.25 billion plus the fund interest, it yields a cash balance of 104 million. And since this reporting, which was just last week, DOC processed all of the journal entries for that large payroll appropriation I just talked about, which means the cash balance as of yesterday was 85 million. We expect public safety to complete their journal entries this week, which would bring the cash balance down to 65 million. And then along with other departments that are completing their FY21 CRF spending, we believe that there will be about 57 million cash balance going into FY22. Then jumping back up to the beginning of the report, Exhibit A and the Exhibit A summary detail where we believe that 57 million will live, and those will be FY22 appropriations. A majority of those funds are actually Act 74 appropriations, the 15 million of public safety arrearages that you heard about earlier. There's another 15 million for FY22 DOC payroll, and then 2.5 million for the legislature for reopening. The remaining funds are in PSD and AHS. All departments with remaining spending authority from FY21 unspent will be reporting in their carry forward memos what they intend to do with those funds. And then the commissioner has authority in Act 74 to revert and reappropriate via an ERR any unobligated CRF appropriations between July and December, and even beyond December, actually. And we will continue to manage the fund closely as we approach that December 31st deadline. Last item. So at this time, I'm not concerned about funds being left unobligated by December 31st, because if any funds are reported available in the department carry forward memos or later, we have known CRF eligible costs that we can apply CRF to. Namely, I'm thinking about the public safety FY22 payroll, which would be an estimated 20 million, 12 million from general fund and 8 million from transportation fund. We also know about 10 million of transportation fund and AOT that would be CRF eligible, both payroll and operating. So those are our backstops in case departments come to us and say they can't spend within the next 6 months.
Thank you,
That's-
Ms.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate particularly the documents. We'll pour over those. Commissioner Gratian, do you have any concluding remarks?
Two. The first is that if anyone goes through these documents and has questions, we are more than happy to dive deep into it. As you can see, we've been pretty careful. And you know, the second thing I would just say is overall, I think it's just really, I think, impressive. You know, that this body and the governor have worked together and have deployed of 1.25 billion plus $280,000 of interest, all but $2,000 of that. I just think it really, it's impressive. I'm sure that in FY22, in the next 6 months, more will come in that, you know, of unobligated or unneeded that we will redeploy into payroll. But I just think it's a nice story to tell.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Kitchell?
I just wanted to comment, Candace, I believe this might be the first time you've testified before Joint Fiscal.
Yes, I believe so.
And I just wanted to let you know that I thought the way you walked us through the numbers and accounted for the money was very clear and very helpful. So I just wanted to thank you for your presentation and let you know I thought it followed in a very logical and understandable sequence. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator.
We all add our thanks to that, judging from the smiles and the nodding heads. So this was just an information item. No action is required. So Commissioner and Ms. Elmquist, thank you very much for joining us and sharing these documents with us. The next item on the agenda is approval of limited services positions from the American Rescue Plan Act. And again, we have a number of folks joining us for that, but it looks like Commissioner Gratian is the lead on helping us understand this request from the executive branch. That's the first item. Then we will also have a request from the judicial branch as the second item. So Commissioner Gratian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So also as part of the materials for the Joint Fiscal Committee, there is a document that is titled Staff to Support ARPA Investments. And I will be working off that document. I do have a number of my colleagues from the administration with me in case there are specific questions about specific positions. But first, what I would say is for context, recall that Section G802 in the big bill, Act 74, included 58 positions for the administrative, or pardon me, for the executive branch. And those positions were what we called administrative in scope. They were kind of big picture. They included people, for example, for finance offices, grant writers, general applicability to many different programs. At the time, I had spoke to the committees and said that we are still reviewing specific programs, and we were simply not ready yet to to make requests in terms of specific programs and program needs. But I would be back to you once we, you know, in part, we weren't sure what the size of the programs would be or what would end up in the final legislation. So we waited, we've gone through the programs, and the specific requests, programmatic requests are in front of you. There are a total of 17 and a half positions. The half is from 3.5 FTEs within the Public Service Department. There are 6 positions within ANR, 1 with DEC for the Economic Recovery Grants, 5.5 positions for the Public Service Department, predominantly operating the Community Broadband Board to make sure we're fully staffed there, but also for clean energy development and renewable energy program and the arrearages program. And there are also 5 position requests for VDOL, the Department of Labor, that include the large UI modernization project that's coming up as well. The JobLink program is in the big bill, and apprenticeships. So I am happy to speak to or call on my colleagues to speak to any of these positions, but they are specific to programs that are in the big bill, and we believe they'll to those programs.
Thank you. Committee, any questions on this request? I'm not seeing any hands. I am curious about one, which is having a staff attorney for the economic recovery grants. I'm curious why an attorney is necessary rather than somebody with financial analysis abilities. I mean, maybe Commissioner Goldstein.
Commissioner, you want to take that one?
Sure. Good morning, committee members. Thank you for asking. So based on our experience on the first and second versions of the grant program, there was significant post-award follow-up, data validation to ensure that the folks that put in what they put in on the application was true and verifiable. This work indeed required the work of our administrative services people, and that's good for the kind of financial angle, but in terms of clawback and any type of post-award or post-audit compliance, just to give a frame of reference, we had about 400 that we were looking at to validate. We need, it kind of overloaded the legal staff that we currently have, since there's one attorney really for the whole agency. So we think we need this help because of the post-award follow-up necessary, and the communications and questions, and we would want counsel before we reach out to some of the recipients.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And also for the Department of Labor, Commissioner Harrington, there are 3 positions requested related to UI modernization. I assume all of this is going through the technology. I forget what the summer committee for technology is called, but we had we tied that modernization money to their review. So there's an engagement or process there, question mark.
I do not have the answer to that, but I can certainly make sure we do run it through that committee. Obviously, that's a ADS function. So this was to speak specifically about positions we would need at the Department of Labor to support the modernization effort, both at the unemployment insurance level, as well as the Vermont JobLink modernization level. So again, a little bit of a split there between what the department would need to support that effort, and then obviously what ADS has proposed in terms of modernization work and support as well.
Well, obviously, there's an ADS function and a DOL function, but the two have to come together, and clearly yes, you will need staff there. But yes, it needs to be married as part of a plan, not two different functions. And so I would assume that this would be subject to the oversight of the Information Technology Committee, which is something that we were looking for with the creation of the modernization, certainly of the UI system. I forget about the JobLink where that fits.
Yeah. Yes, and we will be working with JITOC and ADS, but I just wanted to clarify for the committee that there will be ADS needs and resources, but this is also specific to the Department of Labor to support the technology effort as well. But we will be working in partnership with ADS and going through JITOC as well.
Thank you. Representative Ansell?
I want to go back for a minute to Commissioner Goldstein, if I can. I'm wondering if the post-audit process changed any of the results? Has any of the money had to be clawed back, or what's the status of that?
Yes, that is the process that we are undertaking right now as we speak. We got through some, and there are some clawbacks, and there are some where we would end up having to send additional funds. So it's a very lengthy process. Part of the complexity has to do with the simultaneous nature of all the programs that were out there at the same time as our application. So it isn't until post, kind of settling up and figuring out whether somebody got money from another source. So we are in the midst of that as we speak.
Can I just follow up quickly? Will there be some sort of a summary report on that process at some point?
I suppose so. I mean, we didn't, I guess to the extent it does indeed change some of the, some of the figures. Yeah, I think we could do that. I know that the auditor's office is working on their audit, and there may be some actions that we would have to take as a result of that as well. So.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Looking for any other questions in case, I think members have all found this information, but if folks are watching us, all of these documents can be found at the Joint Fiscal Office website related to the JFC, and there are links within our agenda for the backup documents. Let's see, so this is a action item. I'm not seeing any additional questions. If someone would care to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the limited service position request as presented.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. And this is a voice vote, so all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we are in agreement. Then the next item on the agenda is the request from the judicial branch, and Ms. Gable is joining us. Good morning, Ms. Gable. Thank you for joining us to present their request.
Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see you again, though I really look forward to seeing people in person soon. My name is Patricia Gable, and I am the Vermont State Court Administrator. I have two requests today. One is a request to create the, I believe it's 8, but I had to check to make sure. Yes, 8 new permanent positions that were funded in the budget bill, but the position authorization was not included. That's related to B204 of that act. And it's related to a Vermont Labor Relations Board decision, which found that certain temporary employees of the judiciary had been working for a period of time that from the Vermont Labor Relations Board view meant that they could not continue to be carried as temporary positions. And so for those of you who have been on appropriations committee, the appropriations committees, you will have known that that was part of our original budget request last year, and we went through various testimony on that. And then the second item is a request for an increase in limited service positions and a transfer of limited service positions. But perhaps before I go to the second item, Madam Chair, you might want to address the first item.
Yes, thank you. And so I believe the way that we were planning on dealing with the request for the 8 and additional full-time service positions was to direct the executive to work with you, the executive branch to work with you to find those positions within the position pool. So not create new positions, but to to ask that that be accomplished through the position pool. And this would be as part of the letter of intent that we annually accompanies the budget bill, where there may be some questions about what our intentions were. We would spell that out, that was our intention, that it be accomplished that way. So I do not believe this is an action item that the JFC needs to take up. And in fact, we do not have the authority to create positions. We only have the authority to allow the use of limited service positions. So we're managing that through our letter of intent.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, there may be some clarification just for us that is needed. If the outcome is that the positions we've been funded for are actually created for our use, then we're happy, whatever technical way the other branches want to handle that. We're not part of the executive branch pool. And at least at one point, and I assume Commissioner Gresham may still be on, he was proposing that we would need to present to his executive branch pool approval committee and justify our case to the executive branch, something we had already done to the legislative branch. So I'm happy to work with Commissioner Gresham as long as the outcome is what was appropriated in the bill. If that isn't the outcome, then I look for guidance on what to do about that.
I believe that it was our intent that these positions, the permanent positions, be allocated, be there for the judiciary branch. I certainly appreciate the view of the independence of the judicial branch, and period. We believe there is a process for accomplishing this. Senator Kitchell, it looks like you have a thought that you wanted to share with.
No, I just wanted to affirm what you're saying, and we regret it was an oversight. And I think it may have happened. And obviously, this was a huge budget and stuff was coming in so fast and whatever. So we're acknowledge that, but our intent, obviously, by funding the involved positions that were subject of the labor relations case, was to fund them. They're related to the Guardian Ad Litem program. These are positions that are provided a function referenced in statute. And so we're going to be clear in our letter of intent to have these positions made available. If that doesn't materialize, then I'm sure you will be back and we will then determine what other options there are. But our understanding is that we would not have the authority to create permanent positions through the Joint Fiscal Committee process. We can do the limited service that are associated with federal grants, which obviously ARPA is. So I just want to reaffirm what the chair has stated, and our letter of intent will clearly articulate that as well. So I think we're hoping that will resolve it. If not, then we will have to have further discussion about what the options might be.
Thank you. I understand, and I understand the legal restrictions, and I particularly understand how in that enormous budget bill and that extraordinary process, there were little details that didn't get tied up. So we're looking forward to working with Commissioner Gresham on a good outcome.
And I know it may be little in terms of the budget, but it is very big as it relates to the need for the positions in the courts. So again, it was an oversight and it was unfortunate, but in the scheme of things, I think the number of things to be cleaned up was really quite small.
Yes, so I'll remember, as I know you will, the process for many, many years. I too agree with Commissioner Gresham that it's an extraordinary accomplishment, what the three branches have done during this really challenging period, and it makes me proud to be a Vermonter, when we look back on it. So, Madam Chair, if we've resolved that, perhaps we could go on to the limited service position.
Yes, please.
Okay. And so part of your materials are include the Judiciary Pandemic Response and Recovery Plan. This is quite a detailed plan that we first circulated in draft form early in the session. And we consulted with a number of people, including Commissioner Gresham, about this plan. And it took some input from that, informal circulation. And then we did present it to the committees of jurisdiction and to the appropriations committees. And for those of you who weren't on one of those committees, you'll note when you review the plan that it's divided into sections about the ways that the judiciary proposes to respond to and recover from the pandemic. And then at the end, there's an Appendix A that summarizes the limited service positions that are involved. Last year, you may recall that we received CRF funding. And the CRF funding we received, I believe, was for, 38 limited service positions, which we would now like to extend with the ARPA funding. And then in addition, create an additional 18 new limited service positions, which will be phased out over the course of the plan. And so our original plan was for 4 years. Which would really take up the time that leads you to the expiration date of when you can spend the funds for ARPA. And as some of you know, what we did is we built in a ramp up and a ramp down, including recognizing vacancy savings, knowing how much an investment it is to ramp up and how long that will take, but also recognizing that we didn't want a resource cliff at the end. And so the 4-year plan was designed to start reducing the use of limited service positions so that we came not quite, but almost the same number of permanent positions we had at the beginning. The appropriations committees approved 2 years of the 4-year plan. And so we understand with that approval, we may need to anticipate and be very nimble if the committees decided not to extend it past the first 2 years. And so as noted in the plan and as I discussed in the committees, our goal is to deal with these funds the way we would deal with any large grant and have it be project managed so that the outcomes we need to achieve, not just in terms of substantive outcomes, but also in terms of expenditures and number of positions match the plan, which is always a big challenge. And we also understand, based on the various end of year transactions, that these monies may move into general funds as opposed to ARPA funds. But if that were to happen, our goal is to continue to manage the project in a way that has us reducing the reliance on those limited service positions whenever they expire. So the plan does go through the various impacts on the judiciary of the pandemic, which I'm happy to talk about. I know you're very tight for time, so I think rather than do any of that, I'll either answer questions about it, or in the alternative, I'm also happy to answer follow-up questions, because I do know that the plan and really everything that's happening in the judiciary is of great interest to everyone. So whatever questions you have, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. As you noted, this plan was presented both in the appropriations committees as well as the policy committee. So it is understood, and this was another one of those areas where we had intended in the budget to provide the limited service position. So And so I don't think we need the details, although that is in the memo as you indicated. Representative Kornheiser.
Thank you. I've never served on a judiciary committee, so I might have some easy questions for you. Can you tell me what a weighted case study is? That's my
Yes,
first
and
question.
so in business, you might call it a time and motion study.
Oh, great. Thank you. I can follow that.
And maybe I would just say that we have periodically done that in the judiciary, and it's helped us allocate resources, both judge time and staff time, to certain responsibilities. The combination of going to a digital platform, which is the new electronic case management system, which was a planned event, and then going to a video remote platform due to the pandemic, which was very much not a planned event. I mean, eventually it might have been planned, but certainly not in the way we did it, means that almost every job in the judiciary has changed, and particularly out in the trial courts. And so the old weighted caseload study that we relied on, which gets updated periodically, which talked about being in person in courts for all proceedings, and also being on paper in courts for all proceedings, that's completely changed. And so the timing of the weighted caseload study is that we would start it next year, because that means that the last geographic phase of the electronic case management system would have been rolled out at least for a year, which would give court staff and judges the opportunity to adapt to these challenging new technologies, and then also give us the ability to develop the data that got postponed due to the pandemic, so that we would know, following the weighted caseload study, which is done by a third party, the National Center for State Courts, what kinds of positions we need based on both the case weights of different kinds of cases and the number of cases coming in. And the only other thing I'll say about that, because I know the chair wants to move on, is that the biggest learning we get from the weighted caseload study is that the number of filings of a particular case is not really that helpful in understanding the resources that one needs. And so old-fashioned misdemeanors were very quick. You could process a lot of those in a very short period of time, whereas the most heavily weighted cases, at least in the old system, were treatment docket cases and child protection cases. And so that's why the case weights are important.
Thank you, that makes sense. And then my one other question was the Access and Resource Center. Can you help me better understand how that serves communities outside of Chittenden County?
Yes, we're very
especially for folks who really like to walk into the courthouse to get their needs met. Thank you.
So, and so that we've been working on that for a couple of years. In terms of development, we've gotten grant funded advice from the National Center for State Courts and people involved in the self-represented litigant community across the country. And so the center is designed to be both an in-person center and also a center that supports remote support. And again, to try and be really quick to respect the chair's concerns, an example of where in-person is very helpful is it's being sited in the Costello Courthouse in Burlington on the ground floor. And we hope that that will help support our new language access initiatives that we developed in collaboration with the Federal Department of Justice. It gives us an opportunity in person to meet with various communities, sub-communities of our Vermont community, not just for language access, but also for cultural understanding. And so that space, we hope, will be a place where the Bar Association might provide in-person lawyers. Various communities might come together to meet people who come in contact with the court system and then provide housing or social services assistance. So there's a real...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I know that I know we're all conscious of time. So can you explain to me how someone with language needs in Brattleboro would use the center in Chittenden to get their needs met?
Yes, so thanks to the development of technology and these other initiatives, we will be providing remote access to language interpretation when we cannot deliver an in-person language interpreter into an in-person proceeding. And there are many languages in Vermont where we do not have interpreters in Vermont. And so part of our work is to develop the ability to use remote access to interpretation in certain kinds of proceedings. The other thing that will be happening is that we will be providing support to all the courts around the state related to providing support for self-represented litigants and others. And we have a goal and a dream, though not the funding right now, to set up some in-person centers regionally in the state. And so the hub would be in Burlington because of the population center there, but our goal would be eventually to have walk-in centers to cover a couple of other places.
Thank you. Representative Fagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Guess I'm gone. Am I still there? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
Well, that's good because I can't see anyone. So my question has to do, there we are, we're all back. My question has to do with the CRF funding. Presumably we will approve this and effective 1 July, the balance in CRF. And my question is, what is the balance in CRF will need to be reverted back, and then to Commissioner Gresham, because I did a cursory look through the tracking document, could not find the judiciary mentioned in CRF in this regard. Are we tracking this? And I'm sure that there's a plan to apply it somewhere. And if nothing else, as Ms. Holmquist indicated, the fallback for salaries. So again, what is the balance that you'll be reverting, please?
So I can't tell from my screen whether Greg Mosley is on the meeting.
He is not. No.
All right, so I'll tell you what I know. My understanding is we've completely expended our CRF funds, or if not completely expended it, within modest sums. But Greg Mosley and Kelly Carbo are the people who've been working with the executive branch on that. And so if Adam has some different information, he could maybe say.
I do not. I'm actually looking back at the document now to confirm.
Right.
So,
But my understanding is that we have used the CRF funds. And so we have one of the challenges of continuing to fill the limited service positions under CRF is, as you know, they were expiring.
Right.
So at some point you can't go out and fill them.
Hence the reasoning for my question. So if we could just get an email, please, to indicate how much funds are being reverted back from this purpose, that would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Great, we'll do that.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, virtual or otherwise. This is an action item, the creation of additional limited services program positions to meet the needs of the judiciary as outlined in the memo we've received from Ms. Gable. Would someone care to make a motion? Senator Cummings, you're muted, but.
So when you can hear me, I will so move.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All of those in favor, please say aye.
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 And those opposed? Hearing none. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Gable, for joining us and for the work that you were doing, and all of your colleagues in the judicial branch.
Thank you. We're grateful for the support.
I just want to check, does that motion cover the creation of the divisions and the transfer of funding source for the others? Both pieces?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, because
that was
you're
my
right.
motion.
Okay, thank you.
Glad we got clear on that. Okay, and with that, the next item on our agenda is fiscal office updates, and it looks like, Stephen, we should turn that over to you to begin with, at least.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Steve Klein from Druid Fiscal. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly because of I think we're running a little behind on the time we wanted to be. Just letting you know, we are out advertising for the two positions that are created. One is the revenue position that we are filling to better cover that area. And the other is the replacement for Dan Smith, because Dan Smith will be leaving us in August. It'll either be we're looking for either a firm to come in and provide the IT support or an individual. We are really open to either one. We have started to see revenue resumes come in. I think our goal is to have both of those in place by September at this point. I was going to have Graham, if he's on, just give a 2 to 3 minute update on revenues. I don't know if you're here. Yeah.
He is.
Good morning, Graham Campbell from the Joint Fiscal Office. I will be brief. We have final revenue information through the month of May right now, and across the three funds, things look quite good. For the general fund, revenues are sitting about $164 million above target. That's about 10%. And most of that is being led by the personal income tax, which is about $111 million above target, followed by corporate income tax, which is about $38 million above target. The other revenue streams are also flowing in strong, such as the property transfer tax, and the estate tax has actually been quite strong this year as well. Within the transportation fund, also good news, the fund is about $6.4 million above target for the year. That's about 2.6%. And most of that is being driven by unprecedented levels of purchase and use tax revenue, which are mainly due to high levels of fiscal stimulus going into the economy. People are using things like stimulus checks and their enhanced unemployment to purchase cars, but you'll also see it in the education fund through sales and use taxes. So purchase and use tax is driving much of the strength in the transportation fund. It is $8.3 million above target. In the past 2 months have seen some of the highest revenues we've ever seen for monthly revenues for the purchase and use tax. And then on the education fund, it is currently $26.7 million above target, which is about 5% above its target for the first 5 months. And because this is non-property tax revenues that we're tracking, it's mostly consumption-based taxes. And those are the ones that have been really strong because of fiscal stimulus. So of the roughly $27 million above target, about 17 of it is sales tax. And another 4 is purchase and use tax. And then even within the education fund, meals and rooms taxes are coming in stronger than were originally predicted in January, even though that's from a relatively less forecast than what was predicted pre-pandemic. So overall, the three funds are doing quite well revenue-wise. We're tracking the revenues for the month of June right now, and it's still probably a little bit early to make any sort of final comments about how those are coming in. But overall, strength across all three funds. And I think even notwithstanding what happens in June, I think revenues are going to finish well above their January targets for the year.
Mr. Campbell, I have a question, calling on myself, a question with regard to property taxes. What is the lag time when municipalities redo reappraisals because prices are going up? Kind of what is the lag time in seeing that come into the system? Several years.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I'd have to refer that to, I don't know if Mark is here, but I can refer that question to Mark Peralt. And
wouldn't that be reflected in the 3-year average?
Yeah, the 3-year rolling average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will contact Mark.
Still kind of an out year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be captured, but it's in that rolling 3-year average calculation.
So it'll all start, I think, next year.
If people are doing reappraisals.
Right.
Representative Ansel, that
Hello. I was just going to say that the equalization study is supposed to adjust for changes in prices on a year by year basis, but the reappraisal itself will get calculated in the 3-year average.
Okay, thank
But
you.
the equalization study is supposed to make those adjustments.
Okay.
That's what the common level of appraisal is.
Accomplished. Okay, thank you.
2 former tax commissioners have spoken.
There we go. Mr. Campbell, I interrupted you. Were you at the end of your?
Yes, I'm done. I guess I'll turn it back over to Steve once there are any other questions about revenue.
Thank you. So yeah, it's the only other thing I want to flag. And on our website, you'll see an issue brief on the county's funding. It's really sort of the biggest unknown right now. And we're waiting for some sort of final word from Washington about where the money will go. It's really what we're talking about is 111 million that will either go to our counties or go to municipalities. And so we'll probably forward you an update if we hear anything. It's an area where I know the league is being very helpful to towns about that. If it ends up being county money, it's a lot of money for those counties. So I just want to flag that. If questions come up, take a look at the website. It does have the issue brief and a FAQ. We're keeping up to date on that. So that's pretty much it as far as the issues that I was going to do updates on.
Okay, thank you. And under this item, the last one that we have is the fiscal officer transition. As we know, Stephen submitted a letter stating his intention to retire in the middle of August. He submitted that to the Joint Fiscal Committee about 10 days ago. Saying no, you can't retire wasn't an option. And so it's with real regret that we all think about how to move into this next phase with the Joint Fiscal Office. This is an obligation of the Joint Fiscal Committee is to fill the position of the Chief Fiscal Officer. And given that it is such a consequential decision on our part, there have been, not surprisingly, some conversations about how to move forward. The so-called money chairs, so the revenue and the appropriations, the budget committees chairs have had some conversations with the thought of making a suggestion to the Joint Fiscal Committee for how we should proceed with thinking about this process. So in thinking about it, we turn to the legislative branch's human resources chief, Arlene Donovan, and asked her advice as to how to think about filling this position, issues that we should consider. As you can imagine, kind of the array of questions that were out there. We've had a couple of conversations with her. One of the things that the four money chairs did was interview all of the staff of the Joint Fiscal Office and just trying to understand and get their view and advice on how the position should be filled, what their thoughts were about its role and function, concerns that they had, just generally trying to get an understanding of their view of this position. I think our unanimous conclusion was that this Joint Fiscal Office is a really highly functioning office. It is extraordinarily well knit together, great relationships, a lot of respect for each other. And much of that is a tribute to Stephen's leadership in the organization. And one of the things that he has done is not just look at the functioning of the organization today, but think about how to manage a high functioning organization going forward. And there has been some thought to succession planning within the organization. Given all that, and I'm just trying to do a high level overview just to kind of place us all with the same information in the same spot, and then we'll have a conversation. The question before us, I believe, is given that we have to fill this position, that saying no is not an option. Our choices are, do we do an internal search for filling the position, or do we do a much broader national search for filling the position? And based on the conversations that we've had as a subgroup, our recommendation and what I'm putting before you for discussion is that we do an internal search process, that we post the position internally and consider the candidates that may come forward there. We believe that there are very good options. Again, I'm reflecting back on how well functioning the organization is, and as well as the succession planning that has gone on. The other piece that I should mention is the time frame. Stephen has indicated a desire to retire, that he is retiring in the middle of August, and I feel very driven by the beginning of the legislative session and a desire to have us up and ready to respond to that frenetic pace that begins in January. So filling this position in a very timely manner matters. And so that's another piece. With Stephen retiring, it would be important to fill that position rapidly so that we're up and ready to go when the time comes. So that's my framing, and let me stop talking and let you all talk. Senator Cummings.
I just wanted to add to that. What we heard in the interviews is that the corporate climate in the office is very important to the staff, that they're very happy with who they are and how they function. I didn't hear any hire so-and-so, but what I did hear is don't hire anyone who's ever been a lobbyist or been in elected office in a partisan position. Don't hire someone from out of state who doesn't know how we do things in Vermont. That keeping it close and keeping someone that understands how they work and how they function was at the top of, I think, everyone's list. So that was at least what I heard.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Ansel.
Thank you. I wanted to add that I think one of the things that Steve has done really well is recruited and retained some really terrific staff. And using an internal process here, if we're successful at it, I think helps stabilize that staff and that culture in the office. So I think moving to an internal hiring process has some great advantages, and I think it also recognizes the really terrific, both the breadth and the depth of the staff that we have there, which I think we all appreciate.
Senator Kitchell.
Oh, I guess I should weigh in as the fourth, just to say that I think we all heard very similar feedback in terms of the culture, the work expectations. We certainly have a very talented staff, and there was a desire to maintain and have continuity. So with all that, I guess all four of us heard, let's start with internal. If we have talent, we have succession planning that has gone on, and start there. And so our next step was if not only to move with an internal recruitment or search, but then how we would how that process would work, and then ultimately to come back to the committee. So I'll let the chair fill in the next step after our recommendation is to start with an internal search, and then have opportunity for staff to present a letter of interest and a resume, and then I'll let the chair take it from there.
Yeah. So there's a two-part question here. One is, shall we have the internal search process? And two, how do we vet candidates for the position? We obviously could do it as an entire committee. That strikes me as being a little awkward. I think it strikes at least the four of us, and maybe all of us, as a little bit awkward and cumbersome to have such a large vetting committee. And so our suggestion was that the 4 money chairs plus the clerk be appointed by the Joint Fiscal Committee to engage in the interview process and to make a recommendation or to bring information back to the Joint Fiscal Committee for their consideration. Peter?
So thank you, Madam Chair. Let me take care of the first part here, and I think I would feel comfortable being more formal in this, although a voice vote is fine. I would make the motion that we use an internal process to replace, can't replace him, but to have a successor for our joint fiscal officer, and that process be conducted by the Joint Fiscal Committee in accordance with statute.
Okay, so Representative Fagan's made a motion. Is there a second for a motion to do an internal search process? Is there a second? Was that we got some seconds.
I was muted.
Second.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And let's have some further discussion. Representative Kornheiser?
Happy to support this. As you develop interview questions or a hiring rubric or something like that in coordination with our new HR director, I'd love the opportunity to give feedback on that material in whatever formal, informal process works for the 4 of you.
5.
5. Sorry.
Yeah,
5.
adding the clerk in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that offer. Representative Briglin?
I was just curious what internal means, an internal search. Does that mean only JFO staff, or does that mean people in state government who might have the capability to fill this position?
We had a long conversation about that, and as you can imagine, went around and came to the conclusion that we were looking at the Joint Fiscal Office staff. Given, again, the high functioning office relationship, the fact that there has been some thought to succession planning, et cetera, made sense to do that sort of look. The moment you move outside of that area, you might as well be doing a larger search process, was I think part of it, but let me.
That's helpful. I wasn't clear how wide internal actually meant.
Yeah. Rep. Ansel?
I'm wondering whether members of the committee would like to see if Arlene Donovan is available to answer questions. Or should we, are people content with what they're hearing?
I have an additional question, and maybe it should be directed at Arlene, but and I'll just throw it out there now, just to get it into the ether.
Why don't we ask her to jump in?
I did. So I asked her if she was available, and I just got a note back that she is. So if Teresa can send her a link, we can get her on the call. That
She
might
does
be-
have the link in advance, just in case, and I'll run down the hall to make sure she's all set.
Great,
Thank
thanks.
you. And let me just another housekeeping item. You know, sometimes personnel related issues, not infrequently, are obviously addressed in executive session. I'm not feeling that we are on the verge of having a conversation that is more appropriate in executive session, but I just want to remind us that we certainly have a right to suggest taking that step at any point. And so if you're feeling the need for that, just let us know, please. I was hoping, Teresa, did you find?
She's
her?
coming.
Okay. Tim, I'm kind of treading water here, waiting for Ms. Donovan to jump in so that she can hear your question, but
Well, you already answered. I have two more questions. One you've already answered, which is, will she be involved in this hiring process along with the 5 members of this committee, or at least in terms of the vetting process? And clearly the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
She's here.
Yeah. Hi, Ms. Donovan. Thank you for joining us. We've we've had some questions, and maybe you can jump in wherever it feels appropriate. Rep. Briglin?
And I guess the final question I have, and maybe it's as much of a comment, but considering how huge the shoes are to fill with the transition to somebody replacing Stephen, I'm presuming there will be an additional hire within JFO in addition to moving someone to the to his position. But you know, whenever we have any of these big leadership challenges, I think we have to challenge ourselves to address issues related to diversity. And I want to make sure that that is something that is front and center, whether it's someone we hire at the staff level or someone we hire to fill Stephen's shoes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So this is Arlene Donovan. I am the Director of Human Resources for the General Assembly. Good morning, everybody. So if I understand your question correctly, we're discussing the CFO position in your asking. I'm sorry, I had some feedback behind me, so I just want to make sure I've heard you correctly. And so you wanted to make sure that considering that we are discussing doing an internal search, that diversity and equity and inclusion is considered. Was that your question?
That was more of a comment. The first question I had, I think, Arlene, before you came on, was related to how wide the term internal, you know, how wide that was, whether it's, you know, legislative branch, JFO, state government. And I got some feedback from the members of the committee on that.
Okay. Yeah. We were thinking we would, it would be internal within the department to start, considering all of the longevity and qualified skilled individuals who work in there, and we could, you know, certainly take it from there.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Kornheiser.
Ms. Donovan, I just haven't had a chance to meet you yet, and I just wanted to say welcome, and I'm so excited that you've joined us, not just in this meeting, but with the legislature. It's great to have you on board. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Nice to meet you as well. Thanks very much.
I must say that when we began this conversation, again, the money chairs, it was a great relief to say, let's ask Ms. Donovan that question rather than having to figure it out ourselves. And it's been very, very helpful. We were smart to create this position. when we did. So members, the question before us, so we've already agreed that we will go through an internal process. The next question for us is we have not agreed because we did not vote, Peter.
Need to vote,
right?
yes.
Okay, so all of those in favor, I've not seen any further questions or discussions around that. Are there? I think we flagged issues that we want to think about, including.
Can I just be clear what it is that we're voting on? I think it was just to have an internal process. Is that right?
That was my motion.
Yeah.
Okay. So all in favor of the internal hiring process, please say yes.
Before we vote,
Hang on. Yeah.
I want to make sure that, because we've talked about that the internal, if that in fact does not yield the results that we feel satisfactory, then that I don't want us to lock us in that that we don't have the latitude to then move to a broader search. So I think we were looking at this as our first priority, and our first action would be an internal search. If that yields a candidate and a recommendation back to the full committee, that would be fine. If in fact, for some reason that we can't anticipate, that isn't a viable option, I simply want to make sure that the motion that we have before us allows the latitude to move to that broader search. And so I'm looking for clarification on that.
As the maker of the motion, that makes great sense, Senator Kitchell, and so I will amend the motion to agree with that comment.
Rep. Ansel.
I just said clarification as well, that we, assuming that we vote yes on this, we then have to discuss the question about designating a hiring committee. Am I right about that?
Correct.
Okay.
That is the thought process.
Okay.
And so to be clear, that we're talking about an internal search process internal to the Joint Fiscal Office. If that process does not yield a candidate that we as a group feel is appropriate for the Joint Fiscal Officer, then we will engage in a wider, broader search process. And that will be something that all of us are involved in discussing and figuring out how to move through that process. So that is the question right now, is the internal search with the understanding of what that means. Ready for the question? All of those in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed? Okay, no one in opposition to that. So the second question is, we could clearly be the entire committee. That would then have to be a public meeting. And we've ascertained that we are not, it is not a quorum of us if there are 5 members, which is how we got to the recommendation that it be the 4 money chairs and the clerk be appointed by the Joint Fiscal Committee to engage in the process for filling this position. Representative Ansel.
Yes, I'd like to move that we create a hiring committee of 5 members, the 4 money chairs and the clerk, to make a recommendation to the Joint Fiscal Committee.
Second.
Okay, and is there discussion of that? Senator Westman?
I would just say, and having spent years myself in both bodies on appropriations committee and in the Senate, having been on finance and on appropriations, Joint Fiscal is very strong in its support of the budgetary process, and I applaud everything they've done, and I hate losing Steve and think they've done great. I would say the service for other areas, if there's ever short, human services, healthcare, in a number of those areas, there is a dependence on joint fiscal and where and the service that those areas get. And that service that is in those other areas is sometimes not as flushed out and as pushed as some of the other committees in the legislature would like. And having served on health and welfare, I think we need to make sure that those places are heard and that the services that are around there are also given attention as we move forward. And that may be the second step after we hire someone to fill Steve's place, but that may be how we move ahead with filling other places if we move somebody internally up.
Thank you. I thank you, Senator Westman. And this is such an interesting conversation in terms of how we support the work of all of the committees. And I am thinking not only is it something that we need to attend to, but it's one that I'm sure our leadership in both bodies and the other committees which are responsible for thinking about this are attending to. But hear you, and that is registered. Is there any further discussion on, so the question before us is the appointment of the 4 money chairs and the clerk to be a hiring committee on behalf of the Joint Fiscal Committee and to report, which would be
I'm sorry,
not a
hiring committee, to make a recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, simply to make a recommendation to the Joint Fiscal Committee, which is the hiring committee, has that responsibility. Ready for the question? Any further discussion? Okay, all of you in favor of that, please say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Please say so. Okay, so we've accomplished that. Thank you. Our task is, as we noted earlier, is Stephen. I have known him for perhaps 30 years, and just this month figured out that he prefers Stephen to Steve. After I just, so as he's going out, I'm practicing saying his name properly. So Mr. Klein is leaving in the middle of August, and it would be, if possible, I think we should drive ourselves to having a recommendation for the Joint Fiscal Committee at our meeting on July 30th. And that's our goal, I believe. I know we are now late and people have other places to be. Is there any further business for the Joint Fiscal Committee this morning? Seeing none, let us go off.